Hi you guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Torrence, and in today's video we are doing part 2 of showing off my collection. I am doing different brands. I recorded all of this on September 13th on a Sunday, and I'm just going to be showing them throughout that week. My first video was showing off my Pat McGrath collection, which I'll leave linked right here above. And in the second one here, I wanted to show off Juvia's Place. I wanted to do these two particular brands because the first one was a black-owned brand that was rather expensive. This one is a black-owned brand that is rather affordable. And the Pat McGrath is only located, I believe, on the Pat McGrath website as well as Sephora. Juvia's Place on the other opposite end. The Juvia's Place website as well as an Ulta. And I do truly believe that I have every palette that they've released, so I'm going to go ahead and show you all. And the reason I'm showing you all these videos is because I had a very busy week last week, and by showing off this collection, it gives you a chance to not only see what I have, but give you all the chance to vote down in the comment section below on which palette you would like to see a tutorial on next. So if you want to go ahead and see which palettes I have so you can vote on those, just go ahead and continue to watch. I have all of my palettes here just stacked up on these things. I believe these are called palette dividers. I'll make sure I leave them in the description bar below. I got them off Amazon, and they just hang right here on these. They're just stacked up. I have 3 of them here for my Juvia's Place palette. We're just gonna go in order here. I tried to keep them separated with all the 9-pan palettes on one, all the 6-pan palettes on another. But for this first rack, things are gonna switch up because they switched up palette formats. And I'll show you what I mean by that, because for this first one here, this is the Nubian 1. And this is a 12-pan palette. And for Juvia's Place, they always put beautiful artwork on the front of their things. I absolutely love and adore it here. And I think this is one of the more affordable palettes that you can get on the website. Nubian is a neutral palette here. Your everyday, just functioning. You can take this anywhere, use it for the office, use it to go out and play. This is probably the most neutral palette of them all, but it does have matte and shimmers. And with it being a 12-pan palette, this is one of the larger ones here. Next up, they switched things up and went a lot larger, as you can see for the Nubian 2. This bad baby. Beautiful artwork. I actually think it's the same artwork from the front one. They've just switched up the colors. This one here, she's wearing a red headdress, and the other one, she's wearing a blue one. But you can see the size difference we have going on here. They really went larger for this second one. And this is what the inside of the palette looks like. As you can see, it's still rather neutral, but we have many more pops of colors. We have blues, greens, and purples. With your mattes, you can go more orange toned, more red toned. And I think many more people preferred this palette, but this is probably the largest palette that they've put out, that they kept in their permanent line. I believe the Masquerade and Magic Mini are out now, but when those first came out, those had even larger pan sizes than these. Next up, for the Nubian 3, the Coral palette, they went back to the same size as the Nubian 1, and it's also 12 pans just like the first two. But this has a much more smaller size. This one, instead of being a much more warm tone like the first two were, this one is where they switched things up and went for a much more cooler tone. I think if you have a much more fair skin tone, you probably get more use out of this and much more enjoyment as a warm tone palette, because there are some warm shades here, but those grays threw off a lot of people. So this one wasn't as popular with the community as the previous palettes were. Next up, although this palette is still a 12-pan palette, it did get a little bit larger. Not quite as large as the Nubian 2, but larger than the 1 and the 3. And this one here is called the Afrique palette. I think I may have even picked this up before the Masquerade and Magic Mini, just because it has a matte green in this palette. They also did a collection of highlighters with this release, and so I know I have at least one of the pressed ones I think I have 2 pressed highlighters and 3 loose ones from Juvia's Place. And as you can see with this one, this is truly a colorful palette, and it has all of our primary matte shades here. We have our red, our yellow, our blue, as well as a matte shimmer and a matte green. So this was one of those palettes I just truly had to have. There was no doubt about it. Next up is a palette I can honestly admit I don't get nearly as much use out of it. It's called the Saharan, and although the packaging is beautiful and the color story is nice, it just never seems to cross my mind to say, you know what, Torrence, let's go ahead and put that into use for today. And now that I'm looking at it again, I can instantly tell you the reason why is because this is a really orange tone palette, honey. Oranges just don't tickle my fancy the way that yellows and browns do. And so to just open this up and see so many options for warm tones and oranges, it's just not gonna get me going. That green and that black is beautiful, but other than that, they can keep it. Next two are probably the two that probably put them on the map, sent them over the top. Everybody had to have it. That first one, the Magic Mini. And I have the miniature version here because this is probably one of their larger palettes, and the size of this is big enough. I can't imagine how big the originals were. This here is when we get into the 16 pan palettes, and the artwork switches up. Instead of having just one lady on the front, we have two now. And tell me that is not stunning artwork. Like, that is beautiful. And once you get inside, the top half is colorful but slightly neutral. The bottom half is more grungy. It has those green and blue tones. It's like, come on, honey. How can you not enjoy a color story like this? And I think the reason why I like this one so much is because those don't look like straight solid oranges. They have those yellows and those pinky peaches to help accentuate it. And so I like this palette a little bit more than I like the Saharan palette. Next up is the one that I probably have the most sentimental value for, and it is because this is the palette I did my very first tutorial with here on YouTube, and that is the Masquerade Mini palette. I am telling you, honey, this palette is the one that truly made me go, oh yeah, Juvia's Place. I got to start collecting, y'all, because this is stunning. The artwork here, I'm not gonna lie, it did not quite move me as well as the other ones, and I thought it was beautiful, but when I got to the inside, honey, look at those pop of colors. Look at those neutrals. Those are neutrals I can get behind. They're warm, but they're not just extremely oranges. That top half, you gave me greens, you gave me purples, you gave me blues, you gave me pinks. Like, honey, this one here, this is the one Juvia's Place palette I would recommend if you had to try the brand. This is the one to get. Next up, probably the most difficult one to get your hands on, although the brand still shows that they're selling this on a regular basis, it sells out every time it is put on the website, and that will be the Wahala palette. I did a tutorial with this palette to celebrate me hitting 100 subscribers, and before it could get here and I could even post it, it had sold out again. And the reason many of us like this is because it offered their largest color story of 20 shades here, as well as a new glitter formula. With glitters, many people love or hate them. With me, I was truly in love. And when you look at this, this has a color story for the color lover's dreams. Like, look at all the vibrant shades, the different hues. The only reason I would recommend someone not getting this palette is if you're someone who truly loves neutral eyeshadows, or you're someone who absolutely does not want to mess with glitter shades, because there are, I believe, at least 3 or 4 of them in here. But it's beautiful, it's stunning, and I would recommend everyone try this for the colorful lovers. Once again, she's on the website, but it's always out of stock. So if you see it and you have the money, grab it. Another item which unfortunately was a limited edition item, I believe this is also the first and only collab that Juvia's Place has ever done. So I believe you either are gonna have to buy this secondhand because they no longer sell it. This was the Queen palette that was a collab with Fumi, and I can honestly say, when I heard that Juvia's Place was doing a collab, the first thing I said in the back of my head is, if it's not with Fumi, they being disrespectful. I understand a brand has the right to do what they want with whom they want. But if I've ever seen anybody endorse juviasplace and convince me to buy some juviasplace, it was Fumi. So when it came out, I didn't care what colors, what shades it was, I was buying it. And tell me, Fumi did not bring it for the girls. Tell me, the artwork here, like look at that. She has her own artwork on a juviasplace palette. Like, come on, Fumi, you did that. But to not only be on the outside, but to have that Queen of Hearts emblem right there on the inside, come on, Fumi. And let me give you a better view of these colors. Like, come on. These are shadows that were not only good enough for the eye, but good enough to be blush and highlight shades as well. And those two highlighter shades were such a broad range that your skin tone probably didn't even matter and you were able to still use this palette. I really wish they would come out with all of these as single shades if they can't bring the palette back. But I am so glad not only do I have it, but these are the larger pans, so I don't have to worry about running out of them. This was the palette to grab from juviasplace. The next 7 that I want to show you are the smallest of the juviasplace palettes, and like the Queen palette, these are all 6 pans, but they are smaller than the Queen palette. These are also, I believe, these 7 newest palettes to their collection besides the Wahala palette. And I haven't had much time to test these out. I may have swatched them or play with them a little bit, but I can't give a review on any of these. And I have them in alphabetical order, starting off with the Berries palette. This is what the outside looks like. Beautiful and stunning as normal. And of course, because this is considered the Berries palette, it has a berry tone on the outside. This is what those shades look like. We have the Chocolates palette. And I cannot wait until I get this palette on the eyes. I've swatched them a few times, but I have not played with it the way I want to yet. We have the Mauves palette. And I can see this mauve palette being very popular just because it leans between the pink and the purple lovers. It'll just satisfy a very wide range of people. And with this having so many mattes, we already know that's always a good thing. The Nude palette. This palette here is the Nudes palette. And although I've tried it out before, I accidentally grabbed it. I was looking to do the Chocolates palette, and so I was wondering why I wasn't getting the pigmentation I was hoping for. So I'm gonna try this palette again, going in with realistic expectations because I was wondering why I couldn't deepen up my crease the way I wanted it to and had the wrong palette. Next, we have the Sweet Pinks palette. And you can just look at that and tell when they said Sweet Pinks, they were not playing. They were going for the bold, they were going for the bright, and this is my kind of color story here. You can keep your neutral pinks, honey. I like my bold, vibrant, and neon pinks. Next is probably the color story I was most interested in, but I think most people were probably the least interested in, and that is the Taupes palette. I love cool tone shadows just because I have slightly hooded eyes, so cool tones seem to accentuate the crease a lot more. And I think if you're someone who loves cool tones or have a very fair to light medium skin tone, taupes and golds are probably going to be some of your best friends. Like, look at this palette here. That top middle shade is just calling my name. Last, for the 6-pan palettes, the one you know all the girls are going to go crazy for, the violets. And what is so pretty about this packaging is they didn't keep it all purple. that slight hue that it gradiates up to and the yellow at the top, that is absolutely stunning. And if you expect to give anybody a purple palette with this kind of variety without getting them to go crazy, and you're setting yourself up for failure, because they saw this and everybody had to have it. I'm just blessed that I was able to get all 7 before they sold out, because many colors do sell out faster than others. So that pink and purple one, I would recommend you hurry up and grab. The last 9 palettes that I have from Juvia's Place are all probably the most popular ones. They're 9-pan palettes. These are the ones that tend to be found the easiest at Ulta. So many of us like to get those from Ulta because you can always use that $3.50 off coupon. The first one that I have here is one I was excited about just because of how many mattes they had for it. And this is called the Nomad Palette. Grungy green palette. Greens are my favorites. You know I had to grab her. And as stated before, these are all 9-pan palettes, but this was the smallest of the 9 pans here. It's not by much, but compared to the others, you can see the difference when you place them side by side. I'm loving the decals and the artwork on the front of this here. And this is what the colors look like here. Absolutely stunning. I love my greens. I love my yellows. So to me, the only thing this palette could have used was a shimmery green or a shimmery yellow, but I'll take it just the way it is because it's the perfect companion palette for my favorite Juvia's Place palette, which I'll show you in a second. My favorite Juvia's Place palette, just based completely on color story, has got to be this one here. The Tribe palette. I love this bad baby so much, I bought another one, depotted it for my birthday and put it in a larger palette. But I always got to have one of these on stock, so just in case they ever discontinue it, I'll never be without it. Not this particular one, but the other one I depotted, I can say out of all of my Juvia's Place palettes, this is easily has to be the one I've worn the most. And when you see these green shades, you can understand why. Although I'm not the hugest fan of oranges, these just seem to make it work because everything has a slight green grungy undertone to it. So whether I want to go just neutral and stick to those oranges and browns, or whether I want to go over the top, do my greens, make them even more pungent and bright by going in with that yellow to add some more color to it, this is my favorite Juvia's Place palette. And the Nomad just gives me more mattes to help accentuate this. A close call for second place favorite, just because, once again, I love my greens and my yellows. The Zulu Palette, before they had the Tribe Palette, this was the one I wore all the time. I also bought one of these as a second backup, depotted that, so it's in that palette with that Tribe Palette, because they don't play. And this artwork, honey, you can't tell her she don't look good. Now you trying to tell me, as someone who loves colorful looks, especially greens and yellows, that I'm not going to have a good time with this. This color story here is absolutely fabulous, and I honestly cannot wait to see if they're going to give us a Zulu 2, because this is one of the best ones they've ever did. The 9-pan palettes, I truly believe, is where it's at with Juvia's Place. The Saharan II palette. I think out of all of the Juvia's Place palettes, the one that I would probably consider that hidden gem, the one you don't know that you need until you have it and you use it, tell you, the Saharan one might have been something I really didn't care for, because remember I showed you all, it had the green, but it had all of these little orangey shades, so it truly wasn't my favorite. But first, let me give you a peek at this artwork on Saharan II, because when you get on the inside, honey, that's where the magic starts. When I tell you, this is the underrated gem of Juvia's Place. You only get those 3 matte shades on the bottom, but you only need 1 matte, 1 shimmer, and this is going to take you places and be so beautiful you didn't even know you could do. You know I'm not a big fan of oranges or blues, but I like every shade in this palette. I like every shade in this palette. Most people skip over it. I was one of those who did as well. But once you get it, you'll never want to be without it. Now, I know I said that about the past few palettes. Those are palettes you got to go get. This one here, I'ma just say, if you like watercolors, really soft pastel colors, or if you have a fair skin tone, you'll like it. But if you're a rich melanated queen, you might avoid it at all costs. And that's the Deuce palette. The artwork is absolutely amazing. The packaging, stunning. Like, look at that. Honestly, I wouldn't mind them doing this again with other ones because it has sort of a reflective coating on it, so the colors look different ways from different angles. And with most of their packaging being matte, this was nice and a really beautiful twist for things. But as you can see on the inside, the color story it can come off as a bit confusing for me. But what I've come to realize is the reason it's just not my favorite, it's just because I don't find it very flattering on my skin tone. But I truly believe the lighter your skin tone is, the more you will enjoy this palette because the colors are so light and soft that they come off as very pigmented on someone with a fair skin tone. It's just not my personal favorite. This next one, I used to feel the same way I did like I did with the Deuce palette. This one is called the Festival palette. And at one point in time, I really did not care for this palette either. But then I switched up my technique. She cute too, honey. I promise you, she cute too. And the main reason I grabbed this palette is simply because they put a male on the front of the packaging. This was the first and I believe the only one that has a male on it. So for that reason alone, I had to have it. But I'm willing to admit, when I first got it, I just was not feeling it. But this matte red shade and that middle teal shade down on the bottom row made it all worthwhile. To me, this is another one of those palettes where every shade is beautiful, but I like this palette because it really pushes your creativity. But that top matte red shade and that bottom middle teal shade, absolutely stunning. The last three palettes are going to be the Warrior palettes. They're also 9 pans, and these to me are the ones that you would think that they would try to stick to a certain theme, but it seems like they were jumping all over the place. I like them all, but I just really wish they would have stuck to one particular thing. The first one here is the Warrior. One of the prettiest packaging out of all of the palettes here. Absolutely stunning. When you see all of that yellow gold going on, you already know what to expect on the inside. And for me, this is for the girl who likes to keep things simple. If I ever ask someone what color eyeshadow you like and they say gold, this is the palette I point them to. It's gold, it's simple, different varieties of gold, and they don't have to question it, they don't have to get lost. Next up, we have the Warrior II palette, and they switched things up a little bit because this one here is an all matte palette. And although palette 1 was mostly shimmers with I believe 3 mattes, this is a completely all matte palette, which is a beautiful companion for the first one. But I think many people would have really preferred if they would have stuck to an all warm tone palette instead of switching things up in this one and having a mixture of warm and cool tones. But I think this is the perfect all matte palette to go with any of the shimmers. And my very last one is this one here, the Warrior 3. And although you can see they stuck to neutrals for those first two, this one here is far from neutral for number 3. Colorful, bold, bright, and probably one of the most colorful palettes they've released. The Warrior 3 to me was probably the furthest thing from a neutral palette, but considering the fact if you grab all 3 palettes, you'll have your neutrals, your colors, and your matte and shimmers covered. I think that was a smart idea, but I can understand why many people would have wanted it to just stick to a warm neutral theme for the Warrior line. And that's it for my juviasplace eye palettes here. I hope you all really did enjoy this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Also, make sure you leave a comment down below letting me know which palette you would like to see me use, because whichever one gets the most comments, I will do a tutorial for. And don't forget to look out for Saturday's video, because I will also be doing a brand collection for that one as well. But with that being all for now, I hope you all remember to practice, continue to stay blessed, and until next time, bye YouTube.